Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, living in the neighborhood of death. People who have lived in the same place for a long time without moving generally know their neighbors well. They understand whom to trust and to what extent, and whom it's better to stay away from. Sometimes, neighbors, living side by side for years, become closer than some family members. They are asked to look after the house and property while the family is away on vacation or traveling. They invite each other over, and without a second thought, allow their children to accept treats from these individuals. However, sometimes the person who has lived next door for many years can turn out to be a real maniac who has just been waiting for the right moment. The case of Diana Garnica became one of the most sensational in Argentina in recent years. A lot of effort and time went into the investigation, and the criminal could have escaped punishment, as there was almost no direct evidence against him. He did not admit his guilt, and the victim's body was never found. Who was Diana Garnica? Family, early years. Diana Abigail Garnica Cisneros was born on March 30th, 2000, in the province of Tucumán, in the town of Villa Mariano Moreno El Colmenar, Argentina. She grew up in a poor, large family, where she was the youngest daughter and the seventh, second-to-last child of her parents. Her parents, Ramon Garnica and Elizabeth Susana Cisneros, worked hard to provide for their many children and create at least somewhat comfortable living conditions for them. As the youngest girl in the family, Diana was everyone's favorite. Her parents adored her, and her older brothers and sisters took care of her. She did well in school, was talented in drawing, and from a young age, loved to dance. She was unusually intelligent and sensible for her age, never lied to her family, had no secrets from her mother and father, and was very close to her older sister Sonia, who essentially took care of her upbringing while their parents were at work. Since the Garnica family was quite religious, the parents, along with their children, regularly attended church and tried to live honestly and correctly. The older children also began working from their teenage years to help their parents somewhat. The younger ones kept the house in order and each had their responsibilities, which they were accountable for. Diana dreamed of becoming a doctor in the future because she always aimed to help those around her, was very kind, sensitive, and responsive. She hoped to build a successful career, help her family, and said that she would buy her parents a big house where her mom could plant a garden with flowers and fruit trees that she always dreamed of. Unfortunately, these dreams were never to be realized. Moving to a new city, parents' divorce. In 2013, after Ramon lost his job due to worsening financial troubles, the family was forced to move to Juan Bautista Alberdi, located in the same province of Tucumán. The move was extremely difficult for them, and initially their problems only increased. The relationship between the spouses, who had been together for over 2 decades, quickly deteriorated. They began to argue constantly and eventually decided that they could no longer stay together. The divorce was a severe shock for all the children, but the younger ones felt it most acutely. Diana, upon learning what had happened, was simply devastated. The world of a 13-year-old girl crumbled in an instant, and she simply could not understand what would happen next. Despite the separation, the father continued to support his ex-wife and children, but he soon started another family. Elizabeth also struggled greatly with the divorce, but her children supported her, and she was fortunate to find a decent job with a reasonable salary for that area. Gradually, the family adapted to their new reality, settled into their new home, made friends, and established good relationships with nearby residents. Across from the Garnica family lived a certain Dario Javier Suarez. He was a very pleasant, friendly, and kind 36-year-old man. He lived with his wife, Yasmina Alejandra Villarreal, with whom he was raising 4 children. He also had 2 children from previous relationships, and 1 child out of wedlock. It's noteworthy that Dario and his family moved to Juan Bautista Alberdi just 6 months before the Garnicas settled there. Perhaps that's why they quickly became close friends, as they were newcomers to the area. Previously, Suarez had lived in the province of Santiago del Estero, in the northern part of Argentina. Dario, along with his wife, 2 brothers, and some other relatives, worked at a local brick factory, located just a mile from their home. His children were about the same age as Diana and her siblings. They attended the same school, quickly found common ground, and became friends. The adults also got along well, allowing their children to visit each other, even staying overnight, celebrated family events together, and became almost like family. Sonia and Diana even babysat the youngest neighbor's children while their parents were at work. First, Job and teenage romance. After the divorce, Ramon did what he could to help his ex-wife and older children, but after he started a new family, he nearly stopped sending money. The mother's job, although it provided a stable income, was disastrously insufficient for a large family. The family even started a small business making and selling homemade baked goods, but it quickly failed. The situation became so dire that in her upper school years, Diana had to drop out of school to start working and help her mother. The 16-year-old girl took a job as a caregiver, looking after an elderly ill person. Since she wanted to become a doctor in the future, Garnica thought this experience would be beneficial. Despite her young age, she approached her job with full seriousness and responsibility. She precisely followed all instructions, monitored the medication schedule, performed necessary hygiene procedures, and cooked diet-specific meals, adhering to recommendations developed by the treating doctor. Diana liked her job. She felt needed and useful, strived to do everything right, and was highly valued for it. She worked nearly every day from morning to evening, but still faithfully attended church on Sundays with her mother and sisters. She also entered into a romantic relationship with a boy they had previously gone to school with. Sometimes, in the evenings, the young couple walked in the park, simply talking and enjoying each other's company. Nevertheless, Diana adhered to the strict rules and schedule set by her mother. She always returned home by 10 o'clock in the evening, did not stay out at night, and never went anywhere without informing her family where and with whom she would be and when she would return. Sometimes, she went to the city market with the neighbors and their children to buy necessities, but her mother always knew about such trips. Dario treated the neighbor's girl like his own daughter, took care of her, and even occasionally spoiled her with small gifts. When the man learned that she had a boyfriend, he paternalistically gave her advice about how boys could be deceitful and warned her not to let him deceive her or take advantage of her naivety and innocence. The girl shared this conversation with her mother, from whom she still had no secrets. Elizabeth found the neighbor's behavior somewhat strange, but she decided that it was his way of showing care, as he also had teenage daughters the same age as Diana, a strange request. On May 6, 2017, in the late afternoon, Diana unexpectedly received a call from her neighbor, who expressed a desire to help her family out of the goodness of his heart. At that time, Garnica was indeed in desperate need of money, but she was expecting a bonus soon, which she planned to spend on getting a dental prosthesis for her mom and starting repairs on their home's roof, which had started leaking after a recent rainstorm. However, Dario suddenly mentioned that he wanted to buy an air conditioner for Elizabeth as a gift and asked Diana to accompany him to help choose the right one. He insisted that Diana should not tell her mother about it because he wanted it to be a surprise, which wouldn't be possible if she knew. He set up a meeting place and once again extracted a promise from her that she would tell no one. At the moment she received this odd call, Diana was just returning home from work. The neighbor urged her to go with him right away, but she said she needed to drop off groceries she'd bought on the way home and change her clothes. Upon arriving home, she naturally told her mother everything, as she never lied or kept secrets from her. The woman found it odd, too. Although they were on good terms with the neighbors, they had never done anything like this before. Elizabeth wanted to call Dario herself to thank him and decline the gift, as an air conditioner was not a necessity for their family. However, her daughter convinced her not to do so, saying she would go to the store as promised, but would decline the expensive purchase. The girl reassured her mother that everything would be fine and that she would return home not too late. At that moment, the neighbor sent a text message to Diana's phone, stating he was already waiting for her, and again requested that she tell no one about their meeting to keep the surprise. Diana replied that she was on her way out, but then noticed that her phone was almost dead. She decided to leave it at home to charge. She met Dario at the agreed place, and that was the last time anyone saw her. A mysterious disappearance. When her daughter hadn't returned home by the evening, Elizabeth grew worried, especially since she couldn't call her because the phone was left at home. The woman waited a little longer, but as it grew dark, she started to panic. She first called her eldest daughter, Sonia, and told her everything, but she tried to reassure her mother, assuring her that her sister would return home soon and that nothing bad could have happened. As it got completely dark, the mother heard the sound of the neighbor's motorcycle, which pulled up to the house across the street. She thought Dario and her daughter had returned, so she breathed a sigh of relief. However, 5, 10, 20 minutes passed, and the girl still hadn't entered the house. Then the woman went outside and saw that the neighbor was alone. She approached him and asked about Diana, but he seemed surprised and said he didn't know anything about her and hadn't seen her that day. Elizabeth was stunned. She didn't know what to think and couldn't understand whether the neighbor was lying or if her daughter had deceived her for the first time in her life and gone somewhere else. However, the man insisted on his story and even handed her his phone to confirm he hadn't contacted her daughter. Naturally, by that time, he had already deleted all calls and messages. Dario also expressed concern about the girl's whereabouts and even offered to drive around the neighborhood with her mother to look for her and to ask neighbors and the teenager's friends if they had seen anything suspicious. However, the woman declined his help, deciding to start the search herself with her older children. They walked around the neighborhood until late at night, questioning everyone they met along the way and calling all of the girl's friends and acquaintances, but no one had seen her that day. Returning home, Elizabeth decided to check her daughter's phone and saw 2 missed calls and a message from the neighbor, as her daughter had not deleted them. Fully convinced that Dario was lying, the woman decided to go to the police and also called her ex-husband to inform him that their youngest daughter had vanished without a trace. The man lived several hundred miles from his ex-wife's home, but upon hearing the alarming news, he immediately drove to her to help search for their daughter. Police indifference and the horrific scene at the brick factory. When a worried woman arrived at the police station in the middle of the night with a report of her daughter's disappearance, the officers did not take the matter seriously. They assumed that the girl had probably run off with her boyfriend or gone to a party with friends and would return home by morning. Elizabeth shared her suspicions about the neighbor and even showed the calls and messages on her daughter's phone. But the officers dismissed her concerns, saying they would not start a search until at least 24 hours had passed. Realizing they could only rely on themselves, the Garnica family organized a massive search effort. By that time, the father had already arrived from another city, and together they went to the neighbor's house to have a serious talk. However, the house was empty, dark, and quiet, and no one responded to their knocks. The family then went to the brick factory where the neighbor worked with his relatives, and there, the relatives of the missing girl made a dreadful discovery. Since Dario was the senior member of his crew, he had keys to the factory and could access it even when it was closed. That night, the lights were on, and when the girl's relatives entered, they encountered a horrifying scene. The brick-making furnaces were on, though it was a day off and the factory was supposed to be closed. Moreover, all the adult members of the neighbor's family were present. They appeared agitated and were clearly in the process of burning something in the furnaces. The Garnicas were struck by a terrible suspicion. Dario was not in the factory, and when they asked his relatives where he was and what was happening, those present tried to deflect, saying they were preparing equipment for operation and conducting maintenance, and mentioned that the man had just been there and might have stepped out to the restroom. However, within the few minutes that this conversation lasted, the suspect managed to leave the factory through the back door, secretly escaping. Search for evidence and arrest of suspects. After the frightening scene at the factory and the strange behavior of Dario's relatives, the missing girl's family decided to contact the prosecutor's office. By that time, almost 24 hours had passed since the teenager's disappearance, and the investigation was supposed to begin. However, it turned out that no information from the police station where the parents had reported the girl's disappearance had reached them. This situation outraged and angered prosecutor Claudio Banari, who took the case under his personal control and promised to punish the police officers who had neglected their duties. His first action was to request a warrant to search Dario's home and the brick factory. However, since it was Sunday and the judicial system was unavailable, the prosecutor, not wanting to waste precious time, decided to organize everything under his own responsibility. Banari suspected that the suspect might have attacked the teenager, assaulted her, and then ended her life, asking his relatives for help to dispose of the body and evidence. He found it suspicious that Dario's entire family was in the factory on their day off, in the middle of the night, and had inexplicably started the furnaces. The calls and messages from the man to his young neighbor's phone also appeared suspicious. As the family searched for the girl, including through social media, the case quickly received wide publicity, leading to various speculations and guesses. For instance, a theory widely circulated that the young beauty could have been kidnapped to be sold into slavery in a brothel or for organs. One woman even accused a specific person, although it later turned out she was just trying to settle scores with an ex-boyfriend and send him to prison. The search of the suspect's house yielded no results. Obviously, he had not brought the girl there, and the crime had occurred elsewhere. No traces were found at the brick factory either, but Banari did not rule out that the furnaces could have been used as a crematorium to destroy the body and evidence. However, these were only guesses and hypotheses. Nevertheless, the prosecutor initiated the arrest of Dario, using the data from the missing girl's phone as a key argument. His brothers Cesar and Marcus, his wife, sister, mother-in-law, and some other relatives were also arrested as possible accomplices. During interrogation, the suspect denied all charges against him, claiming he had not seen the neighbor and had not communicated with her that day. However, based on data analysis from his phone, as well as gadgets belonging to his relatives and the victim, clear discrepancies in their statements were identified. The man was charged with unlawful detainment, possible assault, and depriving the girl of her life, while his relatives were accused of criminal conspiracy and complicity. All suspects were sent to jail for 3 months during the investigation. The search for Diana. Despite the police's initial disbelief that the missing girl would be found alive, her parents continued to hope for the best. They involved an increasing number of people in the search, organized marches and rallies, engaged the media in the investigation, and demanded that Dario confess where their daughter was and what he had done to her. In desperation, the parents sought audiences with the then ministers of security and justice to influence the investigation and pressure the suspect into making a statement. Although the missing girl's relatives were received by the highest state structures, unfortunately, this did not reflect in practice. Over 200 police officers were involved in the search, as well as service dogs and special equipment including helicopters and search drones, but there were still no results. Alarming discoveries. At a brick factory in one of the kilns during a second inspection, a strange, severely melted metal object was found, along with a tooth fragment. It was suspected that this object was the piercing the missing girl wore in her nose. However, special forensic analysis was required to confirm this, and it would take time. While law enforcement awaited the results, another more thorough search was conducted at Dario's house, where notebooks belonging to the man were found containing quite suspicious notes. These appeared to be sort of personal diaries, from which it was revealed that the man was literally obsessed with his young neighbor. Everything started when the family moved in next door to his house. At that time, she was only 13 years old. The suspect did not write anything specific about what he wanted to do with the girl, but the notes made it clear that she drove him mad. He thought about her every day for years and periodically wrote letters addressed to the neighbor, in which he confessed his love in a peculiar form. After studying all the notes, investigators concluded that the man's obsession only grew over time, and he could no longer control his vile desires. In one of the last letters, he addressed the girl with words implying that she would eventually belong to him, and he would grant her eternal peace and tranquility. This entry looked like a direct threat, indicating that Dario might indeed have taken advantage of her and then dealt with her. The disappearance of physical evidence. It seemed that based solely on the entries from the diaries, the case could be brought to court, but the results of the forensic analysis were still pending. When Benari tried to find out the reason for the delay, it turned out that the evidence had simply disappeared. It was impossible to conduct a DNA analysis of the tooth fragment to determine if it belonged to the missing girl or to establish what the strange metal object was. Subsequently, the prosecutor decided to classify information about the investigation's progress, and the police officers responsible for preserving the evidence were immediately fired and also detained for criminal negligence and possible assistance to the suspects. The investigation itself, after this egregious incident, came under the direct control of federal authorities. Moreover, it soon emerged that part of the records found in the suspect's home had also disappeared. Among these was the last letter in which he promised to grant the girl eternal rest. Without these pieces of evidence, the case could simply fall apart, and the criminal and his accomplices might escape punishment. However, no measures helped determine where the physical evidence had vanished to. 3 months later, the detention period for the suspects expired, but bringing the case to court without key evidence was risky and evidently threatened a loss. What remained were data from the girl's phone and testimony from a random witness who saw the suspect and the missing girl walking together on the street on the day she disappeared. Dario's lawyer demanded that the entire investigation be declared invalid and his client be immediately released, as well as the search results annulled since they were conducted without a special warrant. The court only partially granted the defense's request. The main suspect remained in custody, but all his relatives were released, as nothing specific could be charged against them. However, in May 2019, 2 years after the girl's disappearance, Dario was also released. Over that time, the investigation had not progressed. No new evidence had emerged, and the body had not been found. The long-awaited trial and verdict. Although the main suspect was set free, the case was not closed, and the investigation continued. Occasionally, evidence and testimonies emerged suggesting Diana might still be alive. For instance, a banknote was found with a plea for help allegedly written by the girl. However, handwriting analysis established that the writing did not belong to the missing girl. Only in June 2021, more than 4 years after the girl's disappearance, Prosecutor Benari finally managed to bring this challenging case to court. But the process was constantly delayed due to the global pandemic raging worldwide, and the Garnica family felt increasingly disheartened. The relatives no longer hoped for a favorable outcome, or that the guilty would face deserved punishment. The trial only began in April 2023, 6 years after the crime was committed, with the culprit finally appearing in court. By that time, the missing entries from Dario's diaries, which everyone believed were lost forever, had been found. These became the key pieces of evidence proving the man's guilt. However, additional expert analysis was required to verify the authenticity of these documents. In addition to this, 2 new witnesses appeared in the case. One was Dario's former lover, who claimed he had seduced her when she was still a teenager. She also asserted that the suspect always had a weakness for young girls, and she was far from the only one he had treated this way. The second witness was a neighbor of Caesar, Dario's brother and probable accomplice. According to him, on the night of the girl's disappearance, the brothers arrived together on a motorcycle with a strange large bundle in the sidecar, took some tools from a shed, and then left together. The witness had remained silent for so long because he feared Caesar could harm his family, as he was always volatile and aggressive. The defendant never admitted his guilt, claiming he would never harm the neighboring girl, to whom he felt as though she were his daughter. Nonetheless, the few pieces of evidence were sufficient to render a guilty verdict. The body of the missing girl was never found, and the events of that fateful day were painstakingly reconstructed, establishing that the man lured, took advantage of the teenager, and then ended her life and disposed of the remains, likely with the help of his relatives. On May 2, 2023, Dario was found guilty of the abduction, taking advantage of and ending the life of Diana. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His brother Caesar, as well as any other relatives, could not be held accountable. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.